Hello dear viewers, and welcome back. So I was working on my review of the newest death battle, and as I was editing, I saw something in one of my Facebook Messenger groups that pissed me off and was so bad I had to stop and make a video on it. Yep, our friend Fan War is back at it again, and I swear he seems intent on making Death Battle look like the best versus show on the planet in comparison. You know it's pretty bad if I have to stop making a video on Death Battle just to talk about you. So let's not waste any more time. Let's take a look at the damage Fan War has done this time.
What's with the lightning? Okay, so now what? Anybody ready for Cyborg 2.0?
Fight!
Now, where do we begin with this train wreck? Well, let's start with the matchup. It goes without saying, this matchup is terrible. This is a spite beyond any comprehension. And I'm sure if Fan War did his research, he would have known that this was a terrible idea. But he didn't do his research. He just pawned that work off to two other people because he can't power scale. He has admitted this to me, or is too lazy to power scale. Now, the other big problem with this matchup, outside of the fact that it's a spite, which I'll get into more in a little bit, is that he is only using specific versions. He is specifying the 2009 movie version versus the Teen Titans Cyborg. Now, why is this a problem? Well, number one, he is only using the versions of these two characters because they are the only ones he is familiar with. Not only that, but because the normal version of Astro Boy is too powerful. And I know Fan War tried to explain it to me that he only used these versions because he's not familiar with the original version of Astro Boy and he only saw the movie. Rather, that's the case, that is a poor excuse for using not only a vastly inferior and weaker version of Astro Boy, but he is also using a non-canon version of Astro Boy. The 2009 Western movie adaptation is not canon to the original source material. So that's already a huge problem, using non-canon material. And the biggest problem with this matchup is it is a fucking spite. Astro Boy absolutely annihilates Cyborg with no effort. Now, before Sir Splash or Chuck jump down my throat, I'm not saying that there aren't versions of Cyborg that wouldn't spite Astro Boy. There are absolutely versions of Cyborg out there that would destroy Astro Boy. So please don't jump down my throat. I'm not saying that Astro Boy destroys all versions of Cyborg, just this specific version of Cyborg. And I did my research and I looked into it to find out how strong Cyborg and Astro Boy are. And if you're curious, I will link in the description the power scales for these two characters. But I will go into it and give a brief, quick explanation here. But if you want more in-depth, again, I'll link it in the description. So, Astro Boy is moon level and faster than light. Cyborg is building level at best and about subsonic to maybe hypersonic speeds at best. Now, FanWar tries to say that Cyborg is capable of keeping up with Starfire, who can go from Earth into space in a matter of seconds. Now, you're free to put in the comments if this is incorrect or not. However, I'm pretty certain that is a highball. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure there's no way in hell that Cyborg is as fast as Starfire in any way, and I'm pretty certain he most likely took some kind of scene from Teen Titans out of context in order to be able to say that Cyborg held the speed advantage to not make it look like as much of a spite as it is. However, here's the annoying part with this matchup. Even when using a vastly weaker version of Astro Boy, this is still a spite because even the movie version of Astro Boy is still too fucking powerful. The movie version of Astro Boy is city level to mountain level. It even says so in his little screenshot that he is at least mountain level. And he didn't look back at this and see this as a problem because he admitted to me he did no research. The only thing he looked into was the arsenal of weapons that these two have so he can figure out how to make the fight look awesome, which sounds fine on paper, except he didn't actually animate this fight, so what the fuck he was looking up is beyond me. So we have a spite matchup and possible highballing, so we're already at Naruto versus Ichigo levels of bad here. But more problems is he is incredibly inconsistent. He says that he is only using the 2009 movie version of Astro Boy and the Teen Titans Go version of Astro Boy. However, he shows footage from the Astro Boy anime and games like Injustice, which have nothing to do with the versions that he is using. Now, in private messages, he tried to defend this by saying, well, he only used that in the intro. Rather, that is the case or not, it doesn't matter. It's inconsistent. It's all about having consistency. If you're only using a specific version, then don't show footage from things that have nothing to do with the character you're talking about. If you're only talking about the movie version, then don't show footage from the anime. But it's more than just that. In his fight, He uses a version of Cyborg that is obviously not the Teen Titans Cyborg, and he uses a version of Astro Boy that is quite clearly from the anime. And apparently he did not communicate this with his animator. So he couldn't even give the proper sprites and assets to his animator. This is already impressively bad. Even Death Battle will at least make sure they get the fucking simple animation sprites taken care of and make sure they are consistent. Most of the time, at least. But, so there's already a whole bunch of inconsistencies. You're using versions of Cyborg that have nothing to do with the Cyborg you're talking about, and you're using the anime version of Astro Boy, which you claim that you are not using. So inconsistency is a huge problem here. Consistency. You have none. But the problems just continue to pile up for Fan War. The research is absolutely abysmal because you barely have any level of power scaling here. There's none whatsoever. All this is just a bunch of statements. That is it. You just state feats and don't do much else beyond that. There's a difference between stating a character's level and a feat they have achieved and actually power scaling it. And there's no power scaling in this episode whatsoever. Now, rather that is the fault of Fan War or his researchers, I don't care who is responsible. All I care about is that there is absolutely no power scaling done here, which is at least half the fucking point of a versus debate. But moreover, the audio is just terrible. Now, while the animation itself is fine and pretty good for sprite animation standards, I'll give it that. The guy he hired to animate this at least did his job well. The audio and music is just terrible. Once again, just like with Yang versus Doomfist. The voices are shit because you can barely hear what Cyborg is saying, and Astro Boy says absolutely nothing at all outside of occasionally making some noises. So on top of barely being able to hear Cyborg, his voice the fucking dialogue is just terrible. Like, there's no fun banter back and forth between these characters whatsoever. And even then, the music is so fucking generic. It sounds like stock music. I have heard NES music that sounds better than this. I have heard Game Boy music that sounds better than the music that is being used in this episode. And moreover, with the audio issues, One Fish Mob, you are very boring. You have no charisma, no presence, there's no passion or sense of energy for what you're doing. You just sound so miserable and depressed. And me and one of my partners were talking about this in the group, how we both watched it, and he said, Fan War, he sounds so boring. He sounds like he's depressed. He sounds like he doesn't care about what he's talking about. And that's a problem. One Fish Mob just sounds like he's reading off of a script. Now, say what you want about Death Battle. Don't get me wrong, Death Battle can be pretty cringe, but at least there's an energy to Wiz and Boomstick. At least they sound passionate and that they actually give some level of a shit about what they're doing, and at least they try to entertain you, make you laugh, and they do have some semblance of charisma and presence to them. You don't get that with One Fish Mob. There's no semblance of any kind of charisma, any presence, or that he's even invested in what he's doing. He sounds like someone who is just doing a job that they're bored with. And if this person sounds so boring, then why should we be entertained if he might as well be bored by what he is doing? This is not good on any level. Finding anything to praise here is extremely difficult because just like the other episodes I've talked about beforehand, this fails on every single level. The humor is terrible because it mostly just consists of shitty puns. That's all. There is no actual sense of any level of humor. The audio is shit. The research is shit because there's basically no power scaling being done here. And even then, it wasn't actually done by FanWar. He just hired 2 other guys to do it for him. And the next problem is he hired an animator to do his job for him because I guess he finally realized that he's not really all that great of an animator, as we've seen from Jiren versus Saitama. But even then, even with this decent sprite animation, he still manages to fuck it up with a generic soundtrack and terrible audio. Seriously, FanWar, have you not heard of audio enhancement? I get that you might not have the best mic in the world, however, that's still no excuse to not use audio enhancement. Back before, when I was just using a shitty PlayStation 3 headset mic, I would still use audio enhancement to improve the audio. You can still improve the audio even if you have a shitty mic, and you can still at least try to have some kind of charisma. Now, rather you are entertained by my persona or not, I play a persona. I actually have a level of charisma. Now, do I behave in real life the same way that I do in my videos? No, because in my videos, I'm a lot more hyperbolic. I'm playing a more exaggerated persona / character of myself. I'm playing a exaggerated, hyperbolic, edgy trap character that loves lewd stuff and being an edgelord. Now, whether you're entertained by that or not, you can at least get some level of that I at least am passionate about what I'm talking about. Rather you agree with what I say or not, I at least do what I can to bring some level of presence and charisma to my videos at the very least. However, One Fish Mob can't even be bothered to do that. The editing is just generic, standard, and boring, just like everything else. I can't find a single thing to praise here. The only thing I could give credit for is the animation, but the problem is, it was done by someone else and cannot be attributed to anything One Fish Mob did. And of course, it goes without saying, this matchup is terrible. It is god fucking awful. And if FanWar had done his research, he would have known that this is a bad idea. And even if this wasn't a spite of epic proportions, it's still a shit matchup because the logic behind this matchup is they're both robots, so have them fight, and that's it. There's nothing interesting here. The final score for this is a 0 out of 10. This is terrible. Nothing here works. About the only thing I can give any level of credit for is the animation. The animator at least did his job well, but everything else here is just terrible. The music is generic, the audio is terrible, the editing is generic and standard, the jokes are nothing more than puns that aren't even told in any kind of funny way. FanWar himself is just very boring and sounds like he's reading off a script. No charisma whatsoever. Absolutely no attempt at power scaling whatsoever. And there are so many inconsistencies throughout this fight. FanWar, you need some help. Your videos are very, very poor quality. The only time you can ever produce anything of any kind of quality is when you pawn your work off to someone else. Like, do you not see this as a problem? I know you keep trying to tell me that you're improving, but nothing I'm seeing here is improvement. If you go all the way back, there was a time where shortly after I did my review for Sonic.exe versus Red, which is the first Fan War episode I ever reviewed, I had to fix his audio and soundtrack for him because he didn't have a soundtrack. His audio was terrible and the fight had no music whatsoever, so I was nice enough to fix this for him. So when you can barely get basic stuff like audio and editing down right, we have a huge problem here, Fan War. You really need to start improving. You need to start doing some fucking power scaling. You need to improve your animating skills. You need to start using more homemade stuff rather than using Mugen stuff. You have shown me that you have the ability to create your own sprite sheets. Do that. At the very least, if you were making your own sprite sheets, I could at least say, okay, you're using homemade animation instead of just ripping sprites from somewhere else. At the very least, I could give you credit for that. But you're not even doing that most of the time. And when you're only relying on Mugen sprites, you can only make animations based on what you can find, which leads to situations like you using a version of Cyborg and Astro Boy that is not the version of Cyborg and Astro Boy that you are supposedly supposed to be focusing on in this episode, and even then, using a non-canon version of a character and one that is vastly weaker than the original character is unacceptable. Under no circumstances is that okay. My partner that I mentioned earlier said that the creator of Astro Boy did not die for this. And he is correct. I am certain if he was alive, he would be appalled by how disrespectful Fan War is to his creation. That he would just throw away all the hard work that he put into creating the character of Astro Boy and saying, you know what, I only saw the movie that was made by my country, so I'm only going to use that version because your version just confuses me. And he has the audacity to be very, very powerful. And how can I do my shitty matchup if your character is too powerful? Never mind the fact that even the shitty movie version is still too powerful, but fuck you and have a nice day, creator of Astro Boy. Seriously, Fan War, you might as well have just given a middle finger to the creator of Astro Boy. Just like when you gave a middle finger to Clive Barker when you were talking about wanting to use the Hell Priest from the Hellbound Heart, but you were only going to use Pinhead from the movies when Clive Barker made it clear plenty of times that he hates the movie adaptations. They are no child of his. They have nothing to do with his creative process, and they are all basically non-canon. A lot of the Hellraiser movies are glorified fan fiction at best. But you're thinking, I only want to use the movies because people are familiar with the movies, they're more popular, and I don't feel like reading Clive Barker's novels. Dude, that's disrespectful. If you are going to use other people's characters, you need to be respectful, Fan War. But you're not being respectful. Everything here is a failure. And the low budget excuse isn't going to work for me because I have about as much of a budget or less of a budget than you do, yet I'm still able to produce good, high-quality videos. Now, sure, my videos are not perfect. I've admitted multiple times there's times where I have made fuck-ups. I have accidentally uploaded videos with editing errors. I have made shitty videos like my original top 10 worst death battles, which led to me having to remake it. However, I have learned how to work within my limitations. I am able to produce 3D models. I'm able to produce well-edited videos with good style to it. Even people who have made response videos to me have said they like the style that I add to my videos and they think it looks very good. And even when I didn't have a good microphone, I still used audio enhancement to make sure that you can hear me. I'm sorry, but your excuses just aren't going to work on me, Fan War. I've heard every single one of your excuses and I've debunked them all. You have no excuses. Your videos are just bad and you need to improve them. That is why I am making these reviews, similar to Death Battle. I'm not doing this to tear down Fan War. I'm not doing this because I hate Fan War. I absolutely do not hate him. We have some fun in private conversations, and we've had some good chats before. I have nothing against Fan War. However, I make these reviews in the hopes that he will improve, because I have gotten videos made in response to my videos explaining why something I made sucked or was bad. And you know what I did? I took the criticism and I improved. Someone made a response to my original top 10 worst death battles, explained why it was shit. I took the criticism and I remade it. I remade the entire video and I used the criticism to improve it to make a better video. If you truly care about your show, Fan War, you need to improve. And you're not going to be able to run on that, well, I have a small budget or I have a small channel forever. You're not going to be able to rely on that because, like I said earlier, a good YouTuber will find a way to work within their limitations. A good example of this is look at the AVGN when he first started out and look at him now. That is a perfect example of a great YouTuber, because even back when he had no resources, he managed to find a way around his limitations to make great videos. And look at him now. You need to do the same. And I hope that you will. You can either take these criticisms and take some of the advice I've given you in our private messages and use that to improve your videos, or you can continue going down the path you're going down where you will be known as the McDonald's version of Death Battle and leaving people like me to beg to go back into the warm arms of Daddy Death Battle. Because as bad as Death Battle may be at times, your episodes are barely on par with Death Battle filler, okay? Death Battle, at their worst, can still produce better quality videos than you. And this is coming from the people that created Naruto vs. Ichigo. I rest my case. So what's it going to be, Fan War? Are you going to start improving, or are we going to continue with this same song and dance? The choice is yours.
Did I ever tell you the definition of insanity?